kind of knew that when we scheduled this, right?
Yeah, okay.
That was likely.
Nevertheless, this is an official town council meeting.
It will be once Sheridan joins, and she is planning on it. So, but we need her for a quorum. So
right.
We'll wait till she joins us. I doubt we're gonna have Mike Morey.
Yeah.
At least for the beginning. Looks like I think Chris is in his car, but
well, the road just opened minutes ago.
yes.
And Jen, maybe you could put up the agenda. Oh,
it's
good.
really a one-liner, but I'm happy to do that.
Just for official things.
Molly, do you mind resend it? Do you have the Zoom stuff open? Can you just resend it to like Sheridan and Cameron?
Yeah, I'll do it right now.
Just to, in case they're looking for it.
Good morning, Craig. Were your windows rattled a little bit today, this morning? You're muted.
Yeah, a lot of bombing.
Yeah, I should say.
Better than sometimes. We actually had one that set off an avalanche that hit our house, but that was many years ago.
Ah. See, I think we're just waiting for Sheridan.
Yeah. We're still a minute out. Or well.
Oh, are we?
Well, no, it just changed, but
I just resent the invite, so hopefully she joins us.
great.
In a moment. Do we know if Polly was planning on joining?
Cameron may or may not know that.
I think she was, but I don't know for sure.
Oh, there she is.
Hello, sorry to be late.
Okay, you're not late by much. All right. I'd like to call this meeting, a special meeting of the Alta Town Council to order, 9 o'clock on Thursday, February 23rd. This will be held an electronic meeting without an anchor location pursuant to my letter of February 15th, 2023. And the purpose of this meeting is to discuss an ordinance that would create a town manager position. The background on this is that with John's intention to retire, it has created an opportunity to rethink our structure of our town government, and in particular how it operates. And in that regard, I feel it would be appropriate to have a town manager, or what I actually called initially a chief of staff, whose function it is to essentially manage the internal affairs of the town staff. And I think that I have found that it takes a full-time position to do that, and with a part-time mayor, that is just not working as well as it should. So with that, anybody else want to have any opening remarks? In that case, let's go to Cameron, who has drafted a staff report on this that discusses what's going on.
Sure, thanks, Mayor. Jen, can you put the second revised? That one, yeah, thank
Yep.
you.
You're welcome.
So what I tried to do in this second staff report was to lay out the statutory duties of the mayor and the council and lay out how what all of those are. And yesterday, Roger and John Byrne met and I met to go through these and sort of talk through the practical application of what duties the town manager would handle. And so the highlighted sections are the ones that we preliminarily identified as duties and the corresponding authority that could be delegated to the town manager. And so I think based on this list, we have a pretty good start. I've double checked the job description that we've posted out and just tried to go through practically on the day-to-day duties, what they would be doing, how it would function. And I think this list covers all of that. And so for today's meeting, I was hoping to get some further discussion and some input from the rest of the council on how they felt about these duties, whether or not they would be appropriate to delegate. And if so, then I can take this list and revise the actual code language and incorporate those in. The other thing that came out of the discussion is we want to change the voting method of appointing and removing the appointed officials. So those appointed positions are the marshal's office, the town manager when that position is created, and currently the town administrator and the town clerk. Those three positions are appointed currently by the mayor with the advice and consent of the council. And I've received input from Roger and from John Byrne that they think that we would like to have the council be involved in the appointment and the removal of any of those three positions. And so how we would change that is that the mayor would propose and appoint the person in each of those positions with the advice and consent of the council, but they would not be able to be removed by the mayor unless they had the consent of the council. And so that's different from currently, because right now the mayor will appoint with the advice and consent of the council, but the mayor can remove one of those positions just on their own. And so we felt like that would be better to have the council involved on both sides of that portion. And so those are the two issues that we discussed, and that's kind of what we needed to figure out to draft the rest of the ordinance. And so that's kind of where we're at.
So Sheridan,
Can I change my mind and make a little bit of an opening comment?
yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
just getting going here in Alaska, sorry. I think that it's important to, just taking a short step back. This started out as a journey to formally empower the town manager. When you look at the 93 ordinance, there was no empowerment for the manager in that ordinance, and that's the last time the towns visited this issue. So it was important to try to empower the town manager going forward, more formally empower, in hopes that he'd be more effective and feel more supported. But it's also about right sizing the mayor's job. And I guess this is somewhat dovetailing into Roger's comment. It's also about right sizing the mayor's job so that it's not just this unreasonable amount of work for a volunteer position, or what's essentially a volunteer position. And so I see that as twofold. And then Cameron, did you want to tell them did you want to mention, you talked about the council approval. Did you want to get into the mayor and the majority or everyone?
Yeah. Yes, I'm happy to. So,
Hey, wait, time out a minute.
Okay.
Sheridan, you're the only council person who hasn't been hasn't already been thoroughly enmeshed in this. And note that Carolyn and Elise are not here. So you were really the kind of what's the right term?
Focus.
The focus of this discussion.
The swing vote.
Yeah, there you go. Swing vote. Yeah. Okay, back to Cameron.
I'm,
Or,
if
go
I
ahead.
may just briefly say, Mayor, thank you. And I applaud this effort, and I'm in full support of the direction of these changes.
Good.
okay, so the voting, how that would happen is the mayor would propose who to appoint to this position. The council obviously would be involved in the application, reviewing the applications. That's the advice and consent. And at some point in a council meeting, the council would vote to approve the appointment of this person. And that includes the marshal, the town manager, and the clerk. And so the vote for the approval of the appointment would require the mayor's affirmative vote and a quorum of the council, or just a majority of the council. I'm not quite sure how that would work on the appointment if the mayor didn't want to bring somebody to appoint and then the majority of the council, but I'm sure it could come up in some way. But the voting for the appointment or removal would require the mayor's affirmative vote and a majority of the council, or all of the council.
Except for the
without
mayor.
affirmative vote.
Yeah,
Yeah.
except for the mayor, right?
Except for the mayor. All of the council except for the mayor.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so what that would allow is it would allow the council full input on the appointment. And if there was some condition that occurred that they felt like one of those appointed officials needed to be removed and the mayor disagreed, the town council could still accomplish that as long as all of them voted to do that.
Just a quick question. Why would it be necessary for, why does it need to meet a higher bar than just the majority of the council? I'm curious as to what the thinking was behind that.
Good question. So the difference really came from the different voting schemes. And in the discussions, we felt like it was better to have just one consistent method of voting and how to tabulate that. It just became a little unwieldy to have a different standard for a quorum or different standard for a vote. And so that's why we're just trying to keep the voting method consistent and how to establish a quorum. Now, I will say that even if we implement this, if the council had less than all of the council members, the majority of the council could still move to pass an ordinance or a resolution or change budgeting. And that's typically how it happens in other municipalities, is because the council controls the purse strings. If there's something happening that they disagree with, they'll just simply withdraw funding for whatever the problem is, and they can effectively exert their influence that way. And so there are other ways, but we just wanted to keep the voting methods consistent.
Dan, answer your question, Sheridan?
It does, Mayor. I just, and I in no way want to undermine the authority of the mayoral position. I'm just curious as to why it wouldn't sort of meet the same standard of passing legislation. 3 votes of the 5. I understand what you're explaining, Cameron, and thank you for that, but it just seems a little odd, anomalous to me.
And the method that we've described actually comes from the state code. That's the voting method that's required to delegate duties from the mayor or the council to the town manager. And we felt like that did a pretty good job of ensuring that the majority of the elected officials were involved in those decisions.
That's a great answer. That it comes from the code with respect to or it comes from the state statute with respect to removal of the manager. And so we thought we would have the same standard for removal of the clerk or removal of the marshal. So that it would take sort of a super majority. We take everybody on the council. If the mayor didn't want to remove, just making this example up, the clerk, it would take all the rest of us to vote in favor of removing the clerk for it to happen. And so we're just extending the same sort of super majority approach that the state mandates for the town manager. We're extending that to both the marshal and the clerk. And I think that makes sense.
And if I can
Makes
throw
sense
It
to
something,
me.
wouldn't have made sense to have two different standards, I guess was the point there. Like, we can't change the standard for the town manager. And do we, just try to keep track of all these different voting standards? I don't know. It seemed like we should afford the same standard to the clerk and the marshal.
Sounds good.
let me just add something in here. These provisions are for really in the event of frankly terrible circumstances where there's a big problem and that there's contention and among all the players as to who should go and who should stay. And I would hope that in our collective lifetimes they would never come into practice, but you got to have this stuff in there just to be safe.
Right. And the old ordinance had none of this.
Mm.
So, we're, I think, really taking a big step forward by clearly defining the path to being the town manager and clearly defining the path of essentially what's like impeachment of the town manager.
Yeah.
And Roger, I think that was a good point, because there are fairly frequent examples of probably medium-sized municipalities where the mayor is elected and it's a strong mayor form of government, and they will remove all of the appointed officials and put the people that they prefer there into those positions. Now, they would still require the municipal council's consent and approval, or advice and consent, I guess. But it does happen fairly frequently, and it can cause a pretty big disruption. And so what this other process, and the process we're proposing, is allowed under state law. And so what it does is it allows the choice to change those positions to be a little bit more deliberate and a little bit restricted, I guess is the word.
Protected.
Yeah. Good term.
I like it. Yeah, I like it.
So it's a protection against rogue mayors.
Right.
Yeah.
We wanted to, part of this is to try to provide for more continuity of the staff and frankly, less sort of knee-jerk reaction from a newly elected public official. That, some of this is designed to give comfort to our long-term employees, the three principal long-term employees who are officers of the town.
Mhm.
I'm in full support of that.
Mayor, I'd like to point out that Carolyn just joined us, if you didn't notice that.
Oh, good. Welcome, Carolyn. Who's muted.
Thank you, Roger. Sorry I'm late.
Okay, have you kind of picked up on what we're talking about here?
Yes, sir.
You have. Okay, great. All right. Well, then Cameron, why don't you continue?
Okay, so that's very helpful. And if any of the council has questions on what specifics activities would be involved in these highlighted duties, please feel free to reach out or ask, and I can try and clarify.
Okay,
The remaining,
Just,
go ahead.
So I think that the first issue, which I think we've dispatched with, is kind of the hiring and firing. And it takes more than majority of the council to for both actions. And I think I don't detect any objection to that plan. Okay, next.
Sorry.
Should we just go down each of the points, you think?
Yeah.
Give them a
Yeah,
quick Reader's Digest as to why we did what?
Yeah.
Okay.
You want to do that, Roger or John, or do you want me to do that?
Why don't you do it, Cameron?
Okay. So the first one is all employees shall report to the town manager. And we have sort of a little side issue to deal with, but what this basically means is that the town manager would be the person to administer correction, discipline, direction to all of the town employees. And so that's good because there's one path for that to go through. The side issue is the marshal, the manager, and the clerk are not employees. They are appointed officials. And so they are similar to employees in some ways, but they are not similar to employees in other ways. So for example, the town manager could choose to hire or fire employees of the town, but the town manager would not have the ability to remove the marshal or the clerk. And so we've got to figure out, the hierarchy of how that would function. But the first one is essentially all employees would report to the town manager. Any questions on that one?
Just a comment. Is it expected that the marshal and the clerk are going to report to the town manager or not on a day-to-day basis?
Yes, I think on a day-to-day basis, and please, members of the council, chime in if you have a different view, but I think on the day-to-day activities, they would have to coordinate with the town manager, because the town manager under the proposed duties here is going to be running the day-to-day operation. So I think they have to coordinate with the town manager. But
do they have to be appointed directly by the mayor or the town council? Because other language that I'm familiar with is the mayor / town council would have the ability to veto the town manager's appointment of the marshal, but the responsibility for appointing it was at the town manager level, not at the mayor / council.
yes, so that's a good question. Jen, can you scroll to the second part of this second page of the staff report? So in the second bullet point on this page, these are the duties of the mayor that can be delegated to the town manager if the council chooses to do that. We have chosen to split this out. So this last highlighted bullet point, appoint a person to fill a municipal employment position or vacancy. We can include the ability to appoint the marshal and the town clerk to the town manager. In the discussions that we've had to this point, the decision was made to keep the appointment of those positions with the mayor. And so that can certainly change if that's what the council would prefer.
I think the reason we did it this way is we want the town manager to feel like he gets to put the team together and it's his team.
Yeah.
At the same time, we want longevity in these positions, and we didn't want to remove the mayor from, so we left the mayor appointing the two officers, the clerk and the marshal, with the town manager consent, and then but leaving it up to the town manager to for the rest of the employees. So by pulling out the officers, that was sort of reducing the amount of responsibility in this area that was being transferred to the town manager and leaving the mayor somewhat more empowered.
And
I think that's fantastic because the mayor has to be the focal point. I mean, this is the mayor starting the team, and traditionally mayors have the oversight of the manager, police chief, and fire chief, which we don't have.
I
So-
think we envisioned the town manager, the clerk, and the marshal having little arrows going side to side, but then also having reporting up to the mayor as well. All three reporting to the mayor as well, if that made sense.
That's perfect. Now, there's one thing, I mean, another appointment is the town treasurer. We see these things in here, and
That's a
that
good
is
point.
not,
Is
but-
that listed?
Yeah, that's a good point, John. We can either add that to this second bullet point of where it talks about appointing the town manager, the clerk, and the marshal, and the planning commission. We can add treasurer to that because that is a statutory duty for the mayor to appoint that position. If that's what you would prefer, or we can leave it with the town manager, who's going to be pretty heavily involved in budgeting, et cetera. And so I think that would fit either way.
My preference, although it's not a strong one, would be to add the treasurer to appointment of the town manager, town clerk, marshal, and plan commission members.
Yeah, I could even see it being, having some catch-all type phrase in case there's something we're not thinking of, some other office that we might create down the road. It's really officers of the town, isn't it? Like all officers of the town.
yeah, including but not limited to.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, I can change that. Okay, if there's no other comments, Jen, can you scroll back up to the first page? So I think we've talked about the second bullet point, and we sort of have to flesh that out as far as the hierarchy or maybe an org chart, the way John described. But that's in concept how it would work. Are there any questions on that?
When you all think of an org chart, do you see council at the mayoral level on certain things, but not everything? I'm just a little concerned about some of these appointments just being absolutely outside of council purview.
Yeah, can you explain that a little? Like, are you talking
Sure.
about?
Well,
Which
like just what we were talking about, like treasurer, like planning commission, like I don't necessarily want to strip all of that from mayoral responsibilities, but I don't also necessarily want council to have no voice in that
Yeah, so
or to give it all to the town manager. I'm just kind of, and I don't want to make this unwieldy. And I know that, the more oversight, the more challenging it can be to move swiftly, but I'm just trying to think this through, the pros and cons of all of it.
yeah, that's a good question. So under the voting scheme that we've described, the
Mhm.
council would have a say in all of those positions that are appointed by the mayor. If we decide to have the town manager do that, one of those positions, then we can also include a requirement that that's by the advice and consent of the council, if that's the way you would prefer it. As it stands, what I'm going to plan on drafting is that all of the town officer positions will be appointed by the mayor with the advice and consent of the council, and that the removal would also require the advice and consent of the council, or a super majority of the council for removal. And so as
Right.
far as the org chart
The
goes,
mayor plus enough councilmen to make a majority or the supermajority. Right, and this would be a power that I'll shut up.
So as far as the org chart goes, the two people that are the two entities that are at the top is the mayor's office and the council. Those are both equal branches of government. So the
Mhm.
mayor's office, executive branch, the town council is the legislative branch. And so in an org chart, those are on the same level.
Great. That's what I was envisioning. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, the third bullet point is delegating the executive authority of the mayor's office to keep the peace and enforce the laws of the municipality. Now, currently, this practically occurs by the mayor delegating the authority to enforce the laws to the marshal's office. And so the proposal would keep that the same. The marshal's office would enforce the criminal ordinances of the municipality. There is also a civil or an administrative code enforcement function. The noise ordinance is an example of that. Parking with the parking program that we've implemented is a civil administrative enforcement. And so we probably would need to split this duty, and the plan would be to keep the marshal's office as enforcing the criminal laws and report to the mayor through that function. And then the town manager would manage the code enforcement or the civil side of the ordinance enforcement. Any questions on that?
I'd like to hear.
That would include things like building codes.
Correct.
Mike, don't hesitate to weigh in on things that here that would affect your job.
Well, I don't see anything that prevents myself or this from issuing a civil violation notice as long as we're do that by town code. I think what Cameron is maybe saying, manager would oversee the administration of those programs.
Yes. So when you say those programs, that you're talking about the civil portion?
Yeah. Or when we move to still violate notices, it'd be an administrative function that occur for action of fines, fees. So that administratively ultimately be under the town manager.
Correct. You cut out a little bit, so I'm going to just rephrase it to make sure I understood it. The town manager would enforce the civil portion of it, and the marshal's office would enforce the criminal portion.
Right. Necessarily mean that managers out there writing violation notices, the marshal's office can still do that as long as town code allows.
Yeah, I got you. Good point. So yes, the town can designate anyone as an enforcement official. So if there was a civil code enforcement citation that needed to be issued, and if the town felt like the marshal's office was the better way to handle that, or the safer way to handle that, the marshal's office could also do that civil code enforcement. There just needs to be clear guidelines, because there are higher standard and burden of proof for criminal enforcement versus the civil, and we don't want to use the show of the police uniform and the threat of criminal penalties to enforce civil fines. We want to make sure that we have a clear separation of that. But as far as serving a notice or issuing a notice of violation, that could be through the marshal's office as well.
Right. And just to say it again, there's clearly an administrative function that occurs with civil code enforcement, tracking violations, monitoring corrective actions, and then the collection of, fines, forfeitures, and fees.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions on that one? The second one, this next one, the fourth bullet point, is really just a continuation of that. Statutes, ordinance, resolutions, anything that the council directs and sets the policies for the town, the manager would be responsible for implementing and enforcing those.
And this is really that point of executive power, right? Where we get worked up about the word executive, but in the state parlance of the state statute, executive means that you execute the statutes, ordinances, and direction of the legislative body. And so we want to move that to the town manager from the mayor. So this is a pretty big one, actually. And I think we got it right, because we don't want the mayor responsible to see that the policies of the legislative body are carried out. We want the town manager to be responsibility to see that the policies of the legislative body are carried out.
Yeah.
Well, I think you did get it right, and that is the way that it goes now and in the recent past, mostly until there's some kind of a pushback or derail. So like you say, that's the way it should go. That's the way it kind of goes unless something goes wrong.
Yeah,
And then
and
there's
it ties to the whole idea that the manager is going to manage the town day to day pursuant to the direction of the legislative body.
Okay, the next one was the town manager will sign the contracts that are provided for in budget, ordinance, or resolution. And this was really because they're going to be involved directly in the negotiation of these contracts, and they're going to know the duties of that. And it just made sense to have them be the one to actually sign and complete that contract. It would take some of the sort of the day-to-day requirement of the mayor to, come in to sign that. And I think it would work with the other duties that we've chosen to delegate. And so to clarify, they can't just bind the town to any contract. It would only be things that are provided for in budget, ordinance, or resolution. So the council will still have input on what contracts are going to be, how much money is going to be spent, what the services will be, etc.
Yeah, more than input. I mean, that it will limitations.
Makes the budget document even more important, because that authority is really transferred to the town manager via the budget document.
Yeah, plus resolutions. So.
Yep.
And this is a pretty big change in the way we've done everything for the manager. And the budget used to be pretty much the mayor, the clerk, with the budget committee. So, I mean, different municipalities do it differently. This is a very common way of doing it. Just want to point out a change.
And that's a good point. What does everybody feel about the composition of the budget committee? Do you want it to continue the way it has been? Do you want it to change to be more led by the town manager and the committee? How do you foresee that?
Before we get onto that question, is that going to derail our where we're going here, or do you think that's a necessary component to where we're going?
If it's a significant change, we would just want to include it, but we can certainly sort of sidebar that for later.
But, I guess my answer would be the process of developing the budget, I don't see changing dramatically. Okay. I think that's still going to be the clerk. The clerk's still going to be the budget officer. The council's going to have its same approval and won't be subject. This element won't be subject to the sort of supermajority rules we put in to protect the longer term employees, the everybody or the mayor plus a majority rules. This would just be, the budget will still be generated the same way. This is just making it clear that, in addition to the clerk, who still has their statutory responsibilities, we didn't take any statutory responsibilities away from the clerk. We're just saying that it shouldn't be the mayor's job to ensure that the budget is being followed. It should be the town manager's job to make sure that the budget's being followed.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Once developed and approved, it becomes the town manager's job to see that the budget is followed, day to day in terms of staffing and expenses and all. And the clerk's still going to obviously have a big role there too. But we didn't change anything with respect to how the budget is developed and the approval process of that. That's all really largely prescribed by statute anyway. We couldn't change it if we wanted to.
Yeah. In short, the town manager keeps things on track.
Right. And he's just in a better position to do that than the mayor,
Mhm.
because the town manager is running the town day to day. So
Mhm.
that seems to, that seemed to be, and again, this is a sort of I would say this is somewhere between an administrative and executive power that we're moving from the mayor to the town manager. We just think it makes more sense to have the town manager be making sure day to day we're following the budget. And presumably if there's a problem or the clerk feels that, geez, we're not really, we need to do a budget amendment, they're sitting next to each other. And that communication, we think is where this conversation should be, rather than say, well, find out a month later, or 6 months later, geez, we didn't follow the budget at all, and then blame the mayor.
Well, fortunately, our town clerk is very on top of these things and calls attention to these things quite regularly.
Yep.
Right, and that's the team part of how we do stuff. I know Maury and, everybody, we're all talking.
Yeah, good.
So nothing is sneaking up on anybody.
Okay, and then we come to a non-yellow cancel.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt, Mayor. I have a question.
Sure.
Cameron, just with regard to contracts and agreements, it's typical for the police department to execute, contracts and renewals, for the vendors that, we deal with, within the confines of our budget. It's also typical for us to enter into interlocal agreements like the officer involved critical incident protocol, which requires the agency chief to be a signatory. Will we still have the ability to do that?
So I think yes, if we delegate this executive authority to the town manager, either the town manager or their designee. So it'd be the same thing, just a little different way. Currently, the mayor's the one that can sign those. He can delegate that authority to you as the marshal to sign the contracts for those services. If we change that and give it to the town manager could sign it, and or they could delegate that authority to you as the marshal to sign. And so I think it could still continue the same way, but that's a good point. I didn't think about that.
Well, the town manager can delegate, has some, pretty liberal rules as to what he wants to delegate to other people on the staff. So I think your answer was a good one. Instead of your delegated authority, Marshall, coming from the mayor, your delegated authority will come from the town manager. Instead, the town manager would delegate that authority to you.
Understood.
And so on the next one, the cancel or waive fines or forfeitures, that's a statutory duty of the mayor. He can waive, a fee or a fine or a forfeiture. He has to report to the council when and if that takes place. This occurs so rarely, and we felt like it was an important duty to leave with the mayor as a sort of the person that oversees the enforcement, or that authority comes through. And so we chose to leave that with the mayor. And there's also one below about the mayor can commute or release from imprisonment someone that was imprisoned for a violation of a municipal code. I don't know that there are any municipal codes that can result in prison, other than maybe a few rare instances. And so waiving fines and fees or releasing someone from imprisonment, we've left with the office of the mayor.
I think of that as one of the judicial powers, and we set out to leave the judicial powers and powers with respect to the legislative body with the mayor. And so this seemed like it was more of a judicial power than an executive power.
Well, it's kind of like a pardon.
Right. Seems like that should somehow be different than the day-to-day administration of it.
Right.
Because you could see if the town manager, was really getting into it with somebody that, a little intervention from the mayor might be appropriate. Cameron, you're muted.
Sorry. So the next one seemed to just be right in line with the concept of the town manager. They're going to report the condition and needs of the municipality and make any recommendations to the council on the best interests of the town. So this is just really the day-to-day reacting to what happens in the world or the legislature or developments within the town. Okay, the next one is the mayor has the statutory authority to deputize residents of the municipality. I thought the residents was interesting. So they can't deputize non-residents that are over the age of 21 to assist in enforcing laws of the state and of the municipality. I don't know that this has ever occurred. I could certainly see times that it may occur, particularly given how the town can become isolated, with weather conditions or road closures, that kind of thing. And we've chosen to leave that ability with the mayor's office. The next one at the top of this page is, again, just in the keeping with running the day-to-day function of the town. They can examine the books, papers, and records of the municipality or any officer, employee, or agency of the municipality. And this is really just goes to the executive function. They need to be able to know what's going on. This prevents a silo effect in some department not cooperating or not being willing to open up their books or their records, etc. This just gives the manager the ability to know and understand everything that's going on in the town.
Quick question, Cameron, to the previous point. So it just seems appropriate that to deputize residents would reside with our marshal's office, but would that be an assumption that the mayor would delegate?
Yeah, so a good question, Sheridan. It actually lies with both. So the marshal's office can also deputize anyone to assist. It's not limited to residents. I think the difference is the mayor's portion is more of a planning ahead. Like if they can see that there's a need or if they're going to be shorthanded for an emergency, they can take that action prospectively. Whereas the marshal's office and the deputies even on the scene of some incident can just in that moment say, hey, I need you to help me with this. And so there is a dual authority there for them to do that.
Can the marshal's office preemptively do that as well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So, and is the marshal's office deputizing limited to residents also?
No.
I would have to go check the code, but I don't think that it is. I think law enforcement chiefs, sheriffs, or marshals or officers in an emergency can request the aid and issue their authority to that person to aid them.
Yeah, let Mike speak to this.
No, Cameron's got it exactly correct. We can compel a person to come to our aid and assistance.
This whole thing reminds me of Bill Levitt's old old thing about turning the howitzers down valley.
Makes
True.
me. I think I've watched High Noon too many times.
Yeah, and Sheridan, just, one little minor point of clarification. When we call somebody to our assistance like that, it empowers them to also enforce the ordinances of the town. It does not necessarily give them an arrest authority for state code violations.
Thank you.
Okay, so this other part we've sort of partially covered, but the mayor has the authority with the council's advice and consent to assign or appoint a member of the council to administer one or more departments of the municipality. So this generally takes place in municipalities that really don't have either a budget or a staff to manage the town. And so theoretically, the mayor could request, and the council would have to consent for a council member to run one of the town departments. We've chosen to leave that with the mayor because we do have a great staff, and I don't think it's necessary. The next one is the mayor would appoint, with the advice and consent of the council, the town manager, clerk, marshal, planning commission members. We've added treasurer and sort of a catch-all. We've left that with the mayor's office, but then we have delegated or plan to delegate to the town manager the authority to appoint a person to fill an employment position or a vacancy on a committee of the municipality. So for example, if there was a subcommittee to study trails use or short-term rentals or something that wasn't covered in another department, the town manager could form a team and appoint people to that team to study that, and then that subcommittee would make a recommendation to the council, and the council would be the one to actually take action. So those we've chosen to allow the town manager to have that authority from the mayor. Any questions on any of those three? Jen, do you have your hand raised?
I do. I was just going to let the council speak first if they had questions, but in that first bullet point, the assign or appoint a member of the council to administer one or more departments. Does this create an opportunity for conflict between the town manager and the mayor?
Yes, it does. So, I mean, all of this potentially, I think I've talked to some of you before on this, but what we're trying to write is a framework that will allow the town to function under the best and also the worst of conditions. And so in the legal world, the phrase we use is the parade of horribles. And one of the parade of horribles is that you may have a conflict between the elected officials or the appointed officials. And so yes, there is a very real possibility for conflict. So we've tried to manage that conflict with the checks and balances between the executive function and the legislative function of the town. Okay.
Did that answer your question? That answer your question, Jen?
It did answer it. Yes.
I see this as a super remote occurrence.
Right.
Me too.
Ideally.
The members of the council are already, for a volunteer job, this job comes with a lot of work. It's hard to imagine council members being anxious to take up a role, one of the officers also be an officer of the town on an unpaid basis. That seems like a pretty remote set of circumstance.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make sense to us. These are all the statutory things you have to deal with. These are all the statutory things that the mayor has. It didn't make sense to transfer this one to the town manager. It seemed like if in the extraordinary circumstance where we're saying, let's do this, it seemed like it needed to stay with the mayor.
And if I may, I applaud you, Jen, for raising that issue. And I in this discussion, although I know it's primarily directed towards council, I would like to hear from staff what they think, how they feel about these changes, if they have concerns. So I want to welcome that if that's okay to open the floor to them.
Yeah, I second that, Sheridan. Don't hesitate to weigh in.
Thank you. Got it.
Yep.
Okay, and then the last bullet point was really just a catch-all, because the way that the state statute reads is it says these duties are delegated to the mayor. Everything else is delegated to the council along with the legislative duties of the council. And the mayor is a mayor and a member of the council. So the mayor has sort of a dual role in that framework. But anything that hasn't been specifically delegated to the mayor and then through our process that we're developing to the town manager remains with the town council. And so we've chosen to add this last bullet point that would essentially be a catch-all for any other executive or administrative functions that may occur in the future or that aren't specifically given to the mayor, we would give to the town manager. And this is really to catch things that the state legislature may pass that would require the town, for example, to say that the town must develop a water use study and provide that to the state. The town manager would be in the better position under this framework to do that. And so any unknown or future issues that come up, the town manager would be responsible for completing. And then we've also included municipal ordinance or resolution. So the council can direct the town manager through ordinance and resolution, and they would be required to take action on those ordinances and resolutions.
Right, that it becomes the town manager's responsibility, not the mayor's responsibility for compliance.
Yeah, and to keep up on that. There's a lot in the legislature to keep track of and to understand when, the town has obligations through state statute, et cetera. And so this would cover that.
It's really consistent with the basic idea that we're looking to empower the town manager to run the town on a day-to-day basis.
Exactly, which is the whole idea here.
Exactly.
Well, and John, those are the two keys that are important. Empower the manager so that we're not fragmented with everybody running around doing their own thing to manage the town on a day-to-day basis. And that's the key that, there now is an illegal form of government or not legal form of government in Utah where it's a manager council form. I think, the legislature rightly so prohibited that. There's like 5 or 6 municipalities that are still doing that in the state because it just gave too much power beyond a daily basis to the manager who was not elected by the people. Mm-hmm. So the manager could kind of do whatever he or she wanted. And it happened a lot, regardless of what the mayor and the council wanted, until it got to a point where the mayor and the council would just have to fire him. Mm-hmm. So that's the line you have to walk is give this person the authority to do the job on a day-to-day basis without taking away the vote of the people and the mayor and the council.
Right. Pursuant to, I think the magic words in this sentence are municipal ordinance or resolution. Like the town manager is only empowered to the extent that there's direction, resolution, or ordinance from the governing body. Mm-hmm. He can't just make shit up and go rogue here. This power is prescribed. It either has to be prescribed by a statute, meaning state, or municipal ordinance or resolution. So if a majority of the council supports what he's doing, then he could do what he wants, but it really all flows from the legislative body.
Perfect. Just keep that in the back of your minds.
Okay, so having gone through those, this will be super helpful and critical for revising the ordinance. And so that draft ordinance that I sent around was sort of just the rough framework. I looked at a couple of other municipalities, about 5 actually, and picked out the sections that I thought looked the most complete and the best practice. So what I can
Can I make one quick point before we move on from this document? Just for the other council members, you'll notice Cameron listed the council duties and authorities below, and essentially there are no changes. So the council's duties, responsibilities, and powers aren't changing here. Just think that's important to point out.
Yeah,
Thank
that's a
you.
good point.
Agreed. Also, Cameron, in thinking of the parade of horribles, I'm not quite sure if I got that phrase right.
That's
Let-
right.
Let's say in the very unlikely event that the town manager with this empowerment goes off the rails, how swiftly, like how will we know that? There's a monthly reporting aspect to this, but I'm just trying to think of the worst case scenario here.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to look at this. That's how we use the parade of horribles. You think of the best scenario, and you also think of the worst scenario. And so if you had a town manager that went off the rails, which has occurred in other municipalities, there's no question. The council could hear from other town staff, they could hear it from citizens, they could hear it from outside, state entities. And so any way that the council became aware of something that they were concerned about, I think the fastest that you could do something is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 36 hours. You would have to post a notice for a special meeting, and then post an agenda for that special meeting. It would likely be a closed meeting because you're discussing the character competence of the town manager. And then you could meet in a closed meeting. You would have to deliberate and take action in an open meeting. And so you notice the special meeting, you would meet in open session, move to go to closed session, discuss what the issues are, move back to open session, and then vote to remove. And then the voting scheme would take place there. Alternatively, the mayor, if they had concerns, could bring those concerns to the council, and then that same process would take place.
I also see the clerk as, because the clerk's in control of the checkbook, I see the clerk as having a role in guarding against rogue manager behavior.
Yeah, I have an ethical duty,
And that's subscribed to you by statute, so nobody can take that away from you. You know what I mean? None of our work could take that power away from the clerk.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. And that's really when we get the next draft of the ordinance, that's the way that is useful to read it is to read through those sections and then imagine, how would this work in the best of circumstances, and what conditions would exist that wouldn't work under the framework that we set up. And then, because then you can plan to try and format it to account for those conflicts and worst case scenarios that could occur. So what I would like to do from these highlighted bullet points is to revise that ordinance with town staff and send it to all of you to look at, and have you, send feedback to either to me or someone else on the staff so that we can collect that and revise based on your feedback. Because of the Open Meetings Act, we can't have, an open discussion on those revisions outside of an open meeting, but individually council members can respond and talk about their concerns. And then we can schedule this again for discussion in our March meeting or another special meeting if the time is, if we're pressured for time. But I'd like to get that next ordinance written so that you can look at it and have some feedback.
Does anyone feel that we need another round of this before the March meeting?
I think as long as the ordinance sticks, quite close to this document, I don't know why we would meet again before the meeting.
Yeah. Carolyn or Sheridan?
I'm fine with it going forward. I think it's in great shape. I have a philosophical question, but I can table it, or
No, please.
Right. Yeah, do
Um,
it.
So I like the direction of this. I like the idea of empowering the town manager. One of my overarching critiques sometimes of how we govern in Alta is that we don't have paid positions for our mayor. We don't have paid positions for our council, and it inhibits who can run. And so I'm just kind of thinking big picture. What if in the future we were able to create a paid mayoral position? Is this going to then compete with the powers we're creating for a town manager? Or are we setting up a situation that would actually disincentivize making the mayoral position, a career move? Or yeah, I'm not articulating well what I'm thinking, but just to throw it out there. And I'm wondering what council and staff think about that.
That's an interesting thought. I mean, unfortunately, it's so expensive to live in. Well, number one, you have to be a resident to be a mayor.
Mhm.
Number two, if you're gonna be a resident, you're either gonna own your own or finance your own residence, or have it financed through your employer, or I suppose through your family. I mean, you are bringing us something to think about. My feeling is that it's likely to continue the way it has been for some time, which is that the mayor is a distinctly part-time job, and that if it ever came to a situation where, as you described, that you had a full-time mayor who was a resident here, I'd say at that point we would rethink this whole structure.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. That in the process of, in your hypothetical, it's based on the idea that we're going to change the structure of the mayor's, make it a compensated position. We would want to revisit this ordinance. Frankly, we should probably revisit this ordinance every 3 to 5 years. 30 years is definitely too long. And you read the one from 30 years ago, it's an empty glass. There is no, it doesn't even talk about powers. So I think under the scenario you're describing, it's going to take some ordinance work to do that, to turn the mayor into more of the chief executive officer day to day, compensate him, and we'd probably want to transfer back some of these delegated authorities back to the mayor if that was the case. But
right,
be part of a much bigger process. I would say you can revisit this ordinance anytime. So a couple of years into it, we have problems, we need to tune it up. I understand, just like any other ordinance, I understand there's some potential tuning up of the noise ordinance ahead of us. Just like everything else, we might have to come back and revisit this. I think this is a good, reasonable place for us to take it. I don't want to say to start, because when you say to start, that suggests that we're going to be looking to do more impact, in this direction. That's not really the case. This is us just, I think that this is a good, reasonable ordinance, and it's bringing us into the modern era. But over the next 5 or 10 years, somebody's going to need to revisit it again.
Yeah, my general feeling on these sorts of things, if this doesn't work, then we'll fix it. There we are.
Copy.
Before we leave this, let's go into the mayor's judicial, legislative, or ceremonial duties that cannot be delegated or may not be delegated. This first one, regular and voting member of the council. If I were away, could I give a proxy to another member of the council?
Yeah, you cannot delegate away your legislative or judicial functions.
So a proxy is not allowed for me.
My understanding is when it
Or
comes to
council.
being in a council meeting and voting on something, you are either present or not present. There is not such a thing as a proxy.
Okay,
Correct.
and how about for other members of the council? Can they give a proxy?
No,
All right, that's interesting. Okay.
Your
must be.
kind of
present.
proxy would be the mayor pro tem. Like on some of these things,
Yeah, that's
but yeah,
But that's
But
just to
that's-
run the meeting, not to vote.
right. Yeah, correct. Not to vote. Okay.
Yeah, and I saw Chris Colley had his hand up a minute ago, but I don't, did you still have something to say, Chris?
Yeah, well, Sheridan mentioned barriers to entry, to the mayor's office or our elected positions generally. And I guess I thought I would take that opportunity. I totally agree that there are barriers to entry to our elected positions. And I thought I would take the opportunity to just add that I think this is in general, this is the right direction for the town to be heading. It's broadly consistent with what small and medium-sized communities with manager type positions do. It's the way it works in a lot of cities and towns we compare ourselves to routinely. And on the one reason why I think it's common is that it has an impact on that barrier to entry. In my sense of the barriers to entry to our elected positions here in Alta are on one hand that they're not compensated or not well compensated, but also that being the mayor in particular has taken, recent mayors a ton of time and bandwidth. It's just not been, well, it's feasible. It's been feasible for people to act as the mayor in the way that our mayor's position has gone, in the last couple of decades, but it hasn't been easy. And my sense is that if we could truly functionally right-size the mayor consistently over time, the position of the mayor, that it might be more attractive to folks who have day jobs. And I do think that's something that we have to think about in this community of, a couple hundred potential mayoral candidates. So I think we're headed in a great direction, and Sharon, I do appreciate I agree with you on that note.
Yeah, I think in the
Thanks, Chris.
sort of the very beginning. Oh, I'm sorry, John, go ahead. Was that you speaking, John?
no, I think it was Sheridan answering Chris, thanking Chris.
That was a great comment, Chris. Yeah, in the very beginning, I don't know, may not have been online. Yeah, this was really a two-pronged effort. A, we want to empower the manager, formally empower the manager, and B, we want to right-size the mayor's responsibilities. So moving these administrative and executive functions over to the town manager is, I think, consistent with that point.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're kind of at the end. Any closing remarks on
I
anybody
have
here?
one. Do we want to talk about this document? This is the 115-1. I don't know. Did we include this? I have a red line sitting on my desk here. It says town manager office created administrative positions. Was this just a discussion or is this this document? Did we want to talk about this, Cameron, or you want to leave this one?
Yeah, we can talk about it if the council wants. This was just basically sort of the beginning framework of what I set up from looking at about 5 other town codes that have town manager type positions. And so I've tried to make some of the changes to that to reflect the appointment and removal of the town officers. And that's in that first section. And then the rest of this is really going to change. And those highlighted bullet points in the staff report are going to be incorporated into this document to actually lay out the duties and all of that. And so this will be the next thing for the council to review, that will be the actual code language that will affect the changes that we've discussed.
And I understand you're not there yet and ready to discuss because you needed to get the first document first. Just as a heads up, the one thing on here that gives me a little indigestion is under A, town manager duties, point number 3. Consistent with the direction of, if we crossed out town council, put mayor there. Or that was crossed out by us, but I think it, I don't know, that doesn't, that one seems a little bit off the mark.
You're talking about C, appointment?
Talking about A3. So go further down, it's on the next page.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, I mean, and this may just be way far ahead, further ahead than we want to be reading today, but in number 3 there, I don't think that's the right change. It's really consistent with the direction of the legislative body.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're correct on that. And so again, this was just sort of a starting place, and I've tried to make some changes as the discussions went along, but this is not, other than the very top on the appointment and removal, the rest of this really is all going to potentially change. And so I agree with you. I think the language here could be consistent with ordinance and resolution, right? That would be the direction from the council.
Because that would include budget.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the primary way we express our opinion is through the budget process, and provide the direction that we keep alluding to is through the budget process or resolution, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. And again, this, you'll see a copy of this, hopefully midweek next week, to give you plenty of time to look at that and review.
Thank you.
And Craig just tossed in a comment here that we should be aware of. Let's see in the chat, I think. Why don't you just voice it, Craig?
It's just for Cameron. I was
Oh,
just
okay.
commenting on one small clause in there. I think it's very minor.
All right. Okay. All right. Any other inputs for this meeting? Let's see, Sheridan, Carolyn, particularly Carolyn, you haven't spoken up much. You want to have any parting words?
Sure. I guess I really appreciate all the effort that has gone into this meeting and the thoughts behind it. I would like to echo a couple things that Sheridan said. One of which I heard was, let's make sure that we're not imposing changes on the staff that they aren't as happy with. And then the second thing, predicting the future, like what happens if things change. And so sometimes when we make changes that we think are good, they end up not being so good. So I think we're trying to make changes for a current situation, and it's hard to predict the future. So thanks.
I'll coach on that. It's hard to predict the future. Got that.
Well, it is, but it's like, it depends on who the people are in each of those individual roles, you know?
Exactly.
So I think trying to make a change, like a radical change, it seems like it's a great idea, but I do have, it does make me pause.
Yes. And, I think reality is once we have a town manager, that person will have a particular set of skills and non-skills and strengths and weaknesses and personalities. And, then reality will present itself. I will figure out what to do from there. So that's how it is.
True.
Okay, anything else? I would like to, do we have to have a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Okay. I move we adjourn.
Seconded.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Carolyn and
Aye.
Sheridan.
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thanks for all
everybody.
your hard work. Thank you.
Good work,
Excellent.
Cameron.
Yes, thank you.
Nice work, Cameron.